The abandoned ford in the Furnace Creek heat approximately equals 3,950 retrace. The sun had already climbed high above Furnace Creek when the Rangers first saw it. A lonely blue Ford F-150, parked sideways on a strip of cracked desert soil where no one in their right mind would stop. The truck looked frozen in time, as if its owner had stepped away only for a moment, yet the desert around it radiated a silence that felt wrong. Even from a distance, the heat waves shimmered so violently that the vehicle seemed to melt into the horizon. And still, something about it stood out, something unsettling enough to make the patrol slow down. When the Rangers approached, the temperature had already reached a staggering 118 degrees. The metal door handles were too hot to touch without gloves. The windows were rolled halfway down, letting the scorching furnace air flow through the cab. A backpack sat on the passenger seat, untouched. A half-empty water jug lay on the floor, still sealed, as if the man who left it behind did not think he would need it. The ignition key was still in place. That, alone, made no sense. Rangers in Death Valley had seen countless abandoned vehicles, tourists overheating, hikers panicking, engines dying under the brutal sun, but almost no one left the keys in. No one left water behind. No one simply stepped out into the most lethal stretch of the park without a plan, unless something had already gone very wrong. The tires told another story. No skid marks, no signs of a breakdown, no tracks indicating a struggle or attempt to turn around. The Ford had simply rolled in, parked neatly, and stayed there as if its driver had calmly decided to step out into the deadliest environment in North America. One ranger opened the glove compartment. Inside, a folded topographic map of Death Valley. It was the cheap kind sold at visitor centers, tourist-friendly, simplified, dangerously optimistic. And on it, a single route was highlighted. A thin, winding line that abruptly stopped 10 miles before the actual end of the road. The destination circled in red wasn't a campsite, a trail, or a landmark. It was nothing. Empty, desert, another incoherence. They checked around the truck. No footprints heading toward the main road. No sign of distress signals. Instead, faint tracks led away from the vehicle, heading in the direction of a barren ridge where temperatures could kill a human in less than an hour. The prints were shallow, irregular, spaced far apart, suggesting exhaustion, dehydration, or disorientation. The kind of steps a desperate man would take only if he believed something was waiting for him over that ridge. The ranger captain squinted into the heat-blurred distance. Something about this didn't feel like a simple case of a lost hiker. The keys, the water, the map, the direction of travel, none of it matched the hundreds of scenarios they had trained for. If anything, it looked like a man had walked willingly into the heart of Death Valley, abandoning logic and instinct alike. And that was the first moment the captain said the words that would later echo through the entire investigation. Whatever happened here, it wasn't normal. Who was Harry Evans? Before the headlines, before the theories, before the desert carved his name into one of its strangest mysteries, Harry Evans was by all accounts an ordinary man. Not a survivalist, not an adventurer, not one of those desert fanatics who chase heat for bragging rights. Harry was quiet, gentle, almost invisible in a crowd, the kind of man whose life flowed in small, predictable rhythms. And perhaps that was exactly why Death Valley called to him. Born in Flagstaff, Arizona, Harry grew up surrounded by wide-open landscapes, but he never pushed himself into them. He was a slow walker, a careful thinker, someone who preferred the steady comfort of routine. His co-workers described him as pleasant but forgettable, a man who rarely raised his voice, rarely challenged anyone, and never acted impulsively. He spent most weekends reading Western novels, fixing things around the house, or taking short hikes on safe, maintained trails. He was not built for extremes, and he never pretended to be. What he did have was a fascination not with danger, but with silence. Friends said Harry talked often about getting away from noise, about wanting to see landscapes where the world felt untouched. He wasn't chasing a record. He wasn't chasing adrenaline. He was chasing quiet. A quiet he believed only the desert could give him. In the months leading up to his trip, something shifted. Co-workers noticed him carrying folded maps during lunch breaks. He started walking longer routes after work, as if testing his endurance in secret. At the same time, those closest to him saw a kind of restlessness begin to grow beneath his calm exterior. He mentioned feeling stuck, foggy, in need of a reset. He had no dramatic crisis, no shocking event, just a persistent longing to step outside his life and breathe differently. Harry wasn't the type to articulate emotions deeply. His journal later found in his home contained simple phrases. I need to see something real. I feel drained. I need space to think. Not once did he write anything resembling a survival plan. This is important, because it shows who he truly was. A man searching for quiet, not danger. A wanderer of the edges, not a conqueror of the extreme. A solitary but thoughtful soul who loved walking not far, not fast, just enough to clear his mind. So why Death Valley? It appears he had stumbled on a documentary months earlier, one that showcased the surreal beauty of the Badwater Basin, the salt flats, the golden ridges of Zabriskie Point. He spoke about it often afterward, calling the desert otherworldly, a place that feels like it isn't on Earth. He began planning what he saw as a simple personal retreat, a few days of driving, light walking, photography, and solitude. No one imagined he would go deeper than the tourist paths. No one believed he would walk into the furnace alone. But buried beneath that quiet exterior was a subtle determination, almost stubborn, that surfaced only when he felt unseen or underestimated. And in some way, this trip became his private test. Not to prove strength, but to prove presence. To feel something real. To shake off the dullness he couldn't explain to anyone. Harry Evans wasn't running from a dramatic past. He wasn't chasing a thrill. He was simply a man who wanted silence, and underestimated the cost of finding it, and that quiet, longitudinal, almost innocent would lead him straight into one of the most impossible journeys the desert had ever witnessed. The day he disappeared, the morning Harry Evans entered Death Valley. The sky was a pale sheet of white, washed out by a heat so intense it blurred the horizon. He arrived quietly, unnoticed, driving his aging blue Ford along Highway 190 with the windows cracked open, letting in gusts of dry furnace-like wind. It was a weekday. Few tourists were around. Nothing about his presence stood out yet. This was the last day anyone would see him alive. At 9:12 a.m., a ranger's patrol car passed him, heading the opposite direction. The ranger later reported nothing unusual. An older pickup, a lone man at the wheel, slow but steady. Harry looked calm, almost serene, his sunglasses reflecting the blinding landscape. That brief, forgettable encounter would become one of the final confirmed sightings of him. He stopped at Furnace Creek shortly after, a place where the air feels like it's vibrating, where even shadows seem exhausted. He bought 2 bottles of water, a small bag of trail mix, and a map of the park's hiking zones. Surveillance footage showed him studying the map for several seconds longer than most visitors. He paused on the section near Hanapa Canyon, a remote area with no services, no marked trails, and temperatures that routinely soared above 50 degrees Celsius. Then he folded the map, paid in cash, and walked back to his truck. That small decision, barely visible on a grainy camera, marked the beginning of everything that would follow. At 10:04 a.m., Harry turned off the main road. The sign he passed was simple: unmaintained road, 4x4 only, travel not advised. But the deeper truth is this: Harry had no reason to go there, no reservation, no campsite planned, no experience with remote desert routes, and yet his truck rolled forward, leaving behind the safety of Furnace Creek and heading into a region where even experienced hikers feared to wander. Why did he do it? Investigators later debated this point endlessly. Some believed he wanted solitude so pure that even the tourist areas felt too crowded. Others argued he simply misunderstood the map, thinking the track was a scenic detour. Another possibility, whispered but never proven, is that Harry was chasing a moment of clarity, something powerful enough to override caution. Whatever the motive, the road he chose became rough within minutes. The Ford bounced over rocks and sand, climbing slowly into the foothills. Tire tracks indicate he stopped twice, once to take a photograph, once for reasons unknown. The second stop was longer. That patch of disturbed gravel became the final, undeniable trace of him as a driver. From that point forward, something changed. The truck continued several more kilometers before sputtering to a halt. Whether from overheating, fuel, miscalculation, or a mechanical issue, the engine gave up under the brutal weight of the desert. Harry stayed inside for nearly an hour. Investigators later deduced this from the heat distortion around his footprints. He waited, perhaps hoping the engine would cool, perhaps reconsidering the path he had taken. Then, at around 1:15 p.m., he stepped out of the truck. This is the last confirmed moment of his known movements. His footprints faint, but readily lead away from the vehicle and into a shallow wash that curved toward the heart of the valley. No backpack, no excess water, no emergency gear. Just Harry, walking deeper into an environment where even prepared hikers struggle to survive. From a distance, it would have looked like nothing more than a man taking a casual stroll under the desert sun. But the heat was rising fast. The landscape was silent, merciless, and the direction he chose made no logical sense, turning away from the nearest road, away from help, and toward a region the park maps labeled simply as hazardous terrain. Hours later, rangers driving along the main highway would pass by without knowing that somewhere beyond the shimmering heat waves, a solitary figure had just taken the first steps of a journey that defied reason, survival, and everything we thought we understood about the limits of the human body. Harry Evans didn't vanish in a moment. He walked into disappearance, one slow, deliberate footstep at a time. Temperatures rising by early afternoon, the desert had transitioned from brutal to downright lethal. The temperature at Furnace Creek was officially recorded at 47 degrees Celsius, and that was in the shade of luxury Harry Evans no longer had. Out on the open gravel flats, without shelter, the real feel was closer to 55 degrees Celsius. The heat didn't just surround him, it pressed against him like a living force, stealing moisture, clarity, and strength with every step. Death Valley is infamous for many reasons, but few understand the precise danger of its superheated zones. Harry had unknowingly walked straight into one of them. These areas, vast stretches of exposed rock and salt act like mirrors, bouncing sunlight from ground to sky in an endless loop. Even the air seems to shimmer with exhaustion, as if the atmosphere is struggling to remain still. Rangers call these places amplifiers. To the human body, they are nothing short of a death sentence. The rangers, who later investigated Harry's disappearance, understood the situation instantly. They had seen this pattern before, and they knew the statistics by heart. Most visitors who perish in Death Valley are found within 5 kilometers of their last known point because the desert kills quickly, long before a person can wander far. Heat stroke can incapacitate someone in under an hour. Confusion sets in, even earlier. Decision-making collapses. Water becomes irrelevant when the body can no longer process it. But Harry was different. His footprints showed a consistency that startled the search team. No staggering, no erratic turns, no signs of collapse. He moved with purpose, even as the land around him grew more hostile. It was as if he refused to acknowledge what his body must have already known, that every minute spent outside the limited shade of his disabled truck was draining him beyond recovery. Above him, the sun hammered down relentlessly. The ground was hot enough to melt plastic soles. Even veteran rangers avoid walking these zones in the afternoon, preferring dawn or dusk when the earth cools just enough to be survivable. But Harry had begun this journey at the worst possible time, in the worst possible place. As he continued, he crossed into a region known to rescue teams as the Silent Corridor, a deceptively flat stretch where radio signals die and sound seems muted by the density of the heated air. Many call it the most dangerous zone in the entire park. Not because of wildlife there is none, not because of cliffs there are few, but because the terrain gives no mercy and no warning. Distances become blurred. Heat waves distort the landscape. What looks like a nearby ridge is often kilometers away. What looks like a safe shaded rock is often nothing but an illusion formed by shimmering layers of air. Rangers reviewing the data later noted that the day Harry disappeared was one of the hottest on record that month. The park had logged 3 medical emergencies that same afternoon. 2 hikers were evacuated with heat stroke. 1 collapsed less than 200 meters from his car, and all of them had carried water, hats, and gear. Harry had almost nothing. The deeper he walked, the more the temperature climbed. His clothes simple cotton absorbed sweat until they could hold no more, then dried into stiff parchment against his skin. His breathing grew shallow. His steps slowed, but not by much. There was something strange, almost unsettling, about his determination. It was as if he were walking toward something only he could see. To survive these temperatures, a person needs constant hydration, shade, and rest. The human body simply isn't designed to endure such extremes. Even well-trained hikers with perfect equipment can fail. Harry wasn't trained, he wasn't prepared, and yet, as the heat peaked, he kept moving deeper into the deadliest section of the entire national park where the land records more fatalities than any other area, year after year. By the time his footprints reached the edge of the salt pan, one truth had become clear to the rangers retracing them. Harry Evans wasn't just lost. He was walking into a place where no one walks out alive. The first steps into the forbidden zone when Harry stepped out of his Ford, the desert hit him with the force of an open furnace. Heat rose from the ground in waves so thick they distorted the horizon, bending reality itself. For a few seconds he stood still, staring across the endless plain as if trying to measure the danger. But then, in a move that investigators would later call irrational, inexplicable, and deeply troubling, he did something no experienced traveler would ever do. He left his backpack behind. Inside it were the essentials: food scraps, a half-empty bottle of water, a map, even a thin tarp that could have offered the tiniest patch of shade. Everything that could have bought him time, clarity, or survival. And yet, Harry simply closed the truck door, turned his back on the only shelter he had, and walked into the open expanse with nothing but the clothes on his body. For decades, rangers have studied the psychology of desert deaths. They know the early signs of heat, panic and irrational urge to shed weight, to move faster, to escape an invisible threat. The desert doesn't scare like a predator. It overwhelms like a thought, a pressure that builds until the human mind begins making decisions that border on the suicidal. When the temperature rises high enough, panic does not feel like fear. It feels like urgency. That urgency was written all over the footprints surrounding the truck. The first impressions showed control, evenly spaced, wide-based steps, the gait of a calm, healthy man. But within 10 meters, the pattern changed. The steps shortened. The spacing tightened. His feet dragged through gravel. Something had shifted inside him, something that experts later identified as the beginning of cognitive overheating. Harry wasn't thinking clearly. Investigators believe he may have heard a sound or imagined movement in the distance, an illusion triggered by heat shimmer. Or perhaps he believed he could reach help quickly, underestimating the scale of Death Valley's brutal terrain. Whatever the trigger was, the outcome was the same. He crossed the invisible line that separates survivable heat from the zone rangers call the point of no return. As he moved farther away from his truck, crucial signs of panic became even more obvious. He left behind not just his backpack, but also his hat tossed to the ground as though it were an annoyance. Then he removed his jacket, dropping it on the sand without even slowing down. Rangers often find this pattern with heat stroke victims, shedding layers even when the sun is unbearable, driven by a body that has lost control of its internal signals. But here's the strangest part. Harry didn't run. He walked, steady, determined, purposeful. He wasn't fleeing danger. He was moving toward something he thought he recognized, or something he convinced himself was reachable. His steps formed a straight line across the gravel flat, leading him directly into one of the hottest, most exposed sections of the entire valley. Later analysis confirmed what the ranger suspected. If he had walked in literally any other direction, he might have reached shade. If he had stayed near the truck, rescue teams would have found him within hours. But the direction he chose led deep into a forbidden zone where temperatures soar high enough to kill even the strongest hikers. And yet Harry, already dehydrated, already showing signs of heat panic, kept going. Within minutes, he was beyond the distance where most victims collapse. Within an hour, he was in territory where survival is statistically zero. And still, he walked deeper, not knowing that each step was taking him further into a place where no logic could save him, and where he was about to defy everything science believes about human endurance. Following his tracks, when the rangers arrived at Harry Evans' abandoned truck, the first thing they noticed was the silence. Death Valley has a way of swallowing sound, but this silence felt heavier, like the desert itself was holding its breath. They circled the vehicle carefully, scanning for any sign of life, any clue to where Harry might have gone. What they found instead was a single trail of footprints heading into the open desert. One of the rangers, a veteran tracker named Cole Anders, bent down, pressed 2 fingers into the dust, and studied the impressions. He left in a hurry. he murmured, not running, not wandering, but moving with purpose that made no sense under that kind of heat. The prince led away from the road, away from the mountains that offered shade, and away from any possible source of water. It was the first sign that something was very wrong with Harry's decision-making. The early tracks were clear and confident, almost too straight. Most lost hikers drift unconsciously, pulled sideways by tired legs or disoriented by the glare. But Harry walked a perfect line, as if following an invisible path only he could see. Rangers later compared his route to someone marching toward a destination that didn't exist. As the team followed the trail, the desert began telling them the story of Harry's decline. The footprints soon showed signs of imbalance, slightly deeper on one side, as though he were favoring a leg or dragging his feet. This was one of the earliest red flags. Heat stress doesn't simply exhaust the body. It distorts coordination, blurs perception, and warps judgment. Every 100 meters, the Rangers found new evidence of this unraveling. First, they found his hat, then his jacket, then a canteen half full, discarded like trash. Each item was dropped without pattern, without logic. But there was something even stranger. The trail suddenly veered toward a steep, rocky ridge. Rangers call it the wrong hill because no one in their right mind climbs it under peak temperatures. The incline reflects sunlight like a mirror. Even experienced hikers avoid it. Yet Harry had gone straight toward it, as if drawn by a magnet. Colanders paused at the base of the slope, frowning at the impossible route. Why would he go up here? He whispered. Rangers have seen delusion before, victims who imagine water on high ground, who believe height brings rescue. But Harry wasn't behaving like a man seeking safety. He was behaving like a man following a command. The tracks showed how difficult the climb was. His steps became chaotic, overlapping prints, slips, places where he kneeled to catch his breath. The heat on that ridge would have been unbearable. Surface temperatures easily reaching 60 degrees Celsius, enough to blister skin on contact. And yet Harry kept climbing, pushing past pain, dehydration, and disorientation with a determination so strong that investigators later described it as borderline superhuman. Halfway up the ridge, the Rangers found another unsettling sign, a single set of deep footprints pointed sideways, as if Harry stopped and stared into the void of the valley for a long time. Maybe he was looking for help, maybe he was hallucinating shapes in the shimmering air, or maybe, and this is what still haunts the Rangers, he thought he saw something out there. When the team finally reached the top, they were stunned. Harry hadn't rested. He hadn't looked for shade. He had climbed over the ridge and continued descending the other side, straight into the harshest, driest section of the entire zone. With every step, he was heading further from rescue, deeper into the kind of terrain that kills within hours. His path made one thing clear. Harry Evans wasn't lost. He wasn't wandering. He was driven, but by what heat? Delusion, a desperate hope, or something else no one could explain. Whatever force guided him, it was pulling him far beyond the boundaries of human endurance, and the Rangers, stunned by the impossible route, knew they were no longer dealing with a normal disappearance. They were following the trail of a man who should already have been dead, yet kept moving. Heat, mirage, and delirium, it burns. It presses down like an invisible weight, turning every breath into a negotiation and every heartbeat into a struggle. By the time Harry Evans left the last traceable section of his path, the temperature had risen past anything the human body is designed to survive. 47 degrees in the shade, but out here, there is no shade. Only an ocean of white heat, hammering the ground until it vibrates. As Harry walked, something inside him began to collapse. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but the slow, silent unraveling of a mind deprived of water. His vision tightened, colors shifted, shadows bent into shapes they weren't supposed to be. The world around him no longer followed the rules. In extreme dehydration, experts say, the brain starts firing as if it's dreaming while awake. Boundaries blur. Time stretches and folds. Rational thought becomes a luxury the body can no longer afford. And in the desert, where distances deceive and the land itself seems to breathe, hallucinations arrive like unwelcome guides. Harry begins to see movement on the horizon, streaks of light, glimmers of what might be a road, maybe a building, maybe someone standing still, watching him. Mirage pools shimmer like liquid silver, convincing him that water is just a few steps ahead. Each time he approaches, they vanish, retreating deeper into the heat, luring him away from safety. His senses betray him. His instincts betray him. Even his own memory becomes unreliable. The desert exploits this vulnerability with brutal precision. A man in severe dehydration does not walk straight. He drifts, veering towards slopes he would normally avoid, drawn by shapes that make sense only to a failing mind. Harry begins muttering to himself, fragments of words, half-thoughts, maybe trying to anchor himself to reality. But the desert is louder. The ringing in his ears swells. His heartbeat echoes like thunder inside his skull. At this stage, most people collapse. They lie down, fall asleep, and never wake up again. Death Valley claims them quietly, but Harry doesn't collapse. He keeps moving. Experts later tried to explain it by instinct, by panic, by survival reflex. But nothing accounts for the precision with which he avoided certain deadly traps, nor the strange confidence with which he walked into others. The line between determination and delirium dissolves in the desert. A man might believe he's walking towards salvation, when he's walking straight into oblivion. And yet, somehow, Harry Evans pushes forward, deeper into a place where the environment does not kill instantly, it kills inevitably. Every step should have been his last. Every breath a struggle too much. But the sun-baked valley, instead of taking his life, seems almost to guide him, or perhaps torment him. It depends on how you interpret what happened next, because in just a few hours, the delirium would reach its peak, and Harry Evans would cross a threshold that survival experts call the point of no return, a moment where the body is finished. But the mind refuses to understand that death is already closing in, the survival line he shouldn't have crossed. There is a point in every survival story where the numbers stop making sense, where biology, physics, and common sense all agree on one thing: the person should already be dead. For Harry Evans, that line was crossed long before the Rangers even knew he was missing. By the time he left the last patch of navigable ground behind him, his body had already burned through every drop of water he carried. In temperatures approaching 50 degrees Celsius, a human loses over a liter of fluid every hour. Muscles seize. Organs begin their slow shutdown. Vision dims like a dying flashlight. Most hikers collapse within 6 kilometers, but Harry had already walked past 10, then 15, then 20. Experts later calculated what he attempted, distances that even elite ultramarathoners refused to attempt under desert conditions. And Harry was not an athlete. He was a quiet man, an amateur walker, no survival training, no conditioning for the valley's brutality. Every survival specialist who reviewed the case said the same thing. He should have died that morning. Not that afternoon, not that evening, that morning. His legs should have given out. His core temperature should have spiked beyond recovery. His heart should have gone into fatal arrhythmia. His brain should have shut down to protect itself. The desert should have taken him quickly and without ceremony. But Harry Evans refused the script. Instead of collapsing, he accelerated. Instead of turning back toward the road, he veered deeper into the valley's deadliest zone, moving as if something was pulling him forward or pushing him from behind. His gait changed from steady stepping to a staggering, drifting motion that somehow still covered ground. Rangers reconstructing his path found something that stunned them. Harry walked straight through a section of terrain known to kill hikers in under an hour. No shade, no wind, no water. Just heat so intense, it radiates back up from the earth like an open furnace. Yet Harry crossed it, not fast, but relentlessly. At this stage, a person in his condition doesn't think in sentences anymore. The mind fragments into impulses: walk, breathe, move, survive. H1 firing blindly, disconnected from rational thought. It becomes something primitive, something closer to instinct or compulsion. Some experts argued that Harry's march was the result of a hallucination. Maybe he believed he saw a structure, a road, a lake. Others suggested pure panic, the body forcing itself forward even as it collapses from within. But no explanation accounts for the distance. No theory explains the endurance. No model fits the data. Because the truth is simple: what Harry Evans accomplished is physically impossible. Every calculation says he should have stopped breathing long before he reached the halfway point. Every medical reference says he should have slipped into unconsciousness. Every ranger who has worked in Death Valley says the same sentence with absolute certainty. Harry wasn't surviving anymore. He was running on something else. Call it instinct, call it delirium, call it fate, call it something no one can explain. But whatever it was, it pushed Harry beyond the survival line, deep into territory where people don't walk out alive. And yet, unbelievably, Harry Evans kept going. The 64 kilometers, 64 kilometers. On paper, it is just a number. On a map, it is a thin, fragile line across the desert. But in Death Valley, 64 kilometers is the difference between life and myth. When Rangers reconstructed Harry Evans's final route, they expected chaos, short distances, stumbling loops, a collapse near his abandoned truck. Instead, what they found left them speechless. A perfectly traceable path stretching across the most lethal corridor of the valley. Harry had walked the equivalent of a marathon and a half, in conditions that would kill most people after only a few miles. To understand the scale, you need to break down what those 64 kilometers truly represent. The duration, based on stride length, depletion rate, and the sun's position. Experts estimate Harry walked for nearly 32 continuous hours. No shelter, no rest, no hydration. A human without water and heat nearing 50 degrees Celsius is expected to lose consciousness in 4 to 6 hours. After 8, the odds of survival collapse completely. But Harry kept moving for a time span that contradicts everything we know about the human body. The terrain, his path wasn't flat. It rose and fell across volcanic ridges, hostile dunes, and jagged salt formations. In total, he climbed an elevation gain comparable to a small mountain over 700 meters of cumulative ascent while his body was shutting down from dehydration. At several points, the ground becomes almost impossible to cross. Razor-sharp salt polygons, loose gravel fields, wind-carved canyons, areas where even trained rangers lose balance, fall, or stop to rest. But Harry didn't rest, he didn't stop. The footprints show a man who slowed, yet never surrendered. The physical requirements to walk 64 kilometers in the desert: an average person would normally need at least 6 liters of water, 4,000 to 6,000 calories, and periodic cooling or shade. Harry had none of these. No water, no food, no shade, just a body running on fumes, pushing itself beyond the collapse point. Medical specialists later concluded that his organs should have shut down before the halfway mark. His kidneys should have failed. His blood should have thickened like syrup. His muscles should have locked with heat-induced cramps too severe to stand through. And yet, he walked. The impossible conclusion when all data was compiled: GPS reconstruction, survival modeling, medical analysis. One conclusion emerged, repeated by every expert consulted. This distance should have been impossible. The fact he made it defies biological logic. A ranger put it in simpler words. It's like watching a man walk after he is already dead. No known survival case comes close. No dehydration record matches it. No heat endurance test explains it. Harry Evans completed a journey that human physiology is simply not designed to allow. 64 kilometers, a distance that should have ended with a body on the ground. Instead, it ended with a man still standing, still walking, still fighting against a valley that kills without mercy. Harry didn't just survive Death Valley. For reasons no one can fully explain, he walked straight through it. When the Rangers finally saw him, the first ranger to spot him almost didn't believe what he was seeing. It was late afternoon, the hour when Death Valley turns gold and the shadows stretch like claws across the ground. A patrol team had been scanning the horizon from a ridge, expecting at best to find a body, still and silent under the brutal sun. No one on that team expected movement. But then, a shape emerged. At first, it looked like a heat mirage, a distorted silhouette trembling in the shimmering air. The ranger lifted his binoculars, adjusted the focus, and froze. It wasn't a mirage. It wasn't an animal. It was a man walking, slow, broken steps. A body swaying left and right, as if gravity itself was trying to pull him down. His arms hung like dead weight. His head dipped forward, barely supported by a weakening neck. He looked like someone who had already collapsed a dozen times, yet kept forcing his legs to obey. The ranger whispered, almost unconsciously, "No. No way he's alive." The team scrambled. Radios cracked. Coordinates were shared. A rescue protocol was triggered instantly. But even as they descended toward him, Harry Evans kept moving like a ghost, refusing to lie down. One ranger later described the sight. He walked like someone trapped between two worlds, not fully alive, not yet dead, just moving. As they approached, dust swirled around his feet. His boots were torn open. His skin was blistered, cracked, peeling from sun exposure far beyond medical thresholds. His lips were purple, split in several places. His eyes, when he finally lifted them, looked empty, as if the desert had drained every emotion from his soul. And still, he walked. He didn't run when he saw the team. He didn't wave. He didn't call for help. He simply continued forward, step after impossible step, as though stopping meant surrendering the last thread keeping him alive. The Rangers hesitated to intervene immediately. They feared touching him might cause him to collapse. They spoke to him gently, trying to assess his awareness. "Sir, can you hear us?" No answer. Just another step. "Harry, you're safe now?" Another step. Barely. When they finally reached him, his body trembled like a dying flame. One ranger placed a hand on his shoulder. Harry didn't react. His gaze drifted past them, to some distant point they couldn't see. Then, finally, he whispered so faintly, the ranger had to lean in to catch the words. "I kept going." 2 words. A confession. A miracle. And in that moment, the entire team understood. They weren't just witnessing a rescue, they were witnessing the end of a journey that should have killed him a dozen times over. One ranger later said in his report, "I've seen dehydrated hikers, I've seen heat stroke victims, but I have never seen a man walk that far in that condition. I still don't understand how he was upright." They guided Harry gently toward the vehicle. His legs buckled twice, but he refused to fully fall. Even at the edge of collapse, some primal engine inside him kept turning. As they lifted him into the rescue truck, the sun dipped below the ridge its last light, falling across a man who had no right to still be alive. Harry Evans wasn't saved by luck, or by timing, or even by the rescue team. He was saved because, against every rule of nature, he never stopped walking. The border of life and death. When the Rangers finally laid Harry Evans on the stretcher inside the rescue truck, they saw the truth that distance and dust had hidden. He wasn't just dehydrated, he was catastrophically close to death. His pulse was faint, fluttering like a trapped bird. His skin was hot to the touch, the surface temperature dangerously high. His breathing came in shallow, irregular bursts, each one a fragile negotiation between body and oblivion. The medic who examined him later said, in medical terms, Harry should have been dead 24 hours earlier. His organs were shutting down. His body was done. Severe dehydration alters the mind long before it destroys the body, and Harry's eyes told that story. They wandered without focus, pupils slow to respond. His thoughts drifted in fragments, floating in and out of lucidity like waves breaking in the dark. When the ranger asked him his name, Harry hesitated. When asked where he came from, he whispered something about the ridge, the heat, the light. When asked why he kept walking, he answered with a phrase that chilled the entire rescue team. "I couldn't lie down. If I did, the desert would take me." His words were slurred, carried by a dry, cracking voice. The medic tried to keep him conscious, fearing he might slip into hypovolemic shock, one of the final stages before death. But Harry kept drifting. At one moment he muttered, "There was a path. I saw it. Someone was walking ahead, but there was no path. No one ahead." The hallucinatory visions typical of extreme heat exposure had taken control of his mind during those final kilometers, pushing him forward through illusions rather than reality. Another time he whispered, "My legs moved, even when I didn't want to," as if his survival instinct had overridden his failing consciousness. Walking for him when his mind had already surrendered? Medically, several factors should have ended his life long before the Rangers reached him. His core temperature was dangerously high, bordering on heatstroke levels that cause organ failure. His hydration levels suggested he had depleted almost all his electrolytes. His mental confusion indicated swelling in the brain due to prolonged heat exposure. His physical deterioration, muscle breakdown, cracked skin, near total exhaustion showed he had surpassed what most humans could endure. The doctor who reviewed the case later wrote in his report, "Survival past this point is not medically explainable. Evans should not have been capable of locomotion, decision-making, or sustained consciousness. And yet, he walked for hours, for miles. Against every physical law, against every medical prediction." Once stabilized inside the rescue vehicle, Harry drifted in and out of consciousness. The medic kept talking to him, forcing his mind not to slip too far. At one moment, Harry opened his eyes, stared at the ceiling, and whispered, "I thought the desert wanted me." Then he shut his eyes again, his chest rising in a slow, fragile rhythm. The team pushed the vehicle toward the nearest outpost. Sirens off, the heat and isolation made speed pointless. All they could do was watch a man suspended between life and death, as if fate itself hadn't yet decided where he belonged. And as they drove, every ranger understood the same truth. Harry Evans wasn't a survivor by strength. He was a survivor because something inside him refused to dive in, long after his body already had. Reconstructing Harry's route, when Harry Evans finally regained enough strength to answer questions, the Rangers began the impossible task, retracing his steps across one of the deadliest regions on the continent. What they discovered shocked even the most experienced among them. The official reconstruction started with the abandoned ford, still baking under the Furnace Creek sun. From there, investigators walked the direction Harry had taken, following faint footprints that had survived only because of the still, dry air. The path he took defied all logic. Instead of heading toward the main road just 5 kilometers away, Harry walked away from safety, deeper into the valley. Rangers mapped the first segment, a long disjointed curve across loose gravel, uneven, unstable terrain. The footprints suggested hesitation, as if he kept changing his mind, drifting sideways, correcting himself, then wandering again. The first impossible point came early. Harry climbed the side of a steep ridge, an exhausting ascent under 47-degree heat. The incline was so severe that even trained rangers stopped twice for water breaks. Yet Harry, already dehydrated, already disoriented, had climbed it with nothing but fading willpower. The second point made even less sense. Once on top of the ridge, instead of descending toward a visible ranger road, he continued along the crest line. This added nearly 10 kilometers to his journey. The official report described it as a deviation that offers no survival advantage. It was pure loss of energy, pure exposure. Experts proposed theories, but none were fully satisfying. Instinct? Perhaps Harry believed he would find a signal, a structure, or a clearer view at higher elevation. But at that stage of dehydration, instinct is corrupted. It becomes guesswork masked as intuition. Hallucination? More likely, severe heat and fluid loss distort perception. Many victims report seeing paths, shadows, or moving water that do not exist. Rangers noted that Harry might have followed illusions, visions shaped by shimmering heat waves and a failing brain. Chance? It cannot be dismissed. Random direction changes sometimes push lost hikers toward survival. But Harry's path did the opposite for nearly the entire trek. Every choice he made should have brought him closer to death. The third impossible segment was a stretch across open salt flats. Rangers measured it at nearly 8 kilometers of uninterrupted, blistering terrain with no shade, no wind, and ground temperatures exceeding 60 degrees Celsius. Under normal circumstances, a person in Harry's state would collapse within the first kilometer, yet he crossed the entire plain. The fourth point, the Miracle Corridor, became the centerpiece of the reconstruction. Harry passed through a narrow cut between rock walls, an area so rarely traversed that even local guides avoid it. The passage requires climbing a sharp incline littered with unstable stones. Rangers who rewalked it said, if he slipped once, that would have been the end. He shouldn't have been capable of coordination at that stage, but he made it through, and it led him by sheer coincidence toward the patrol route where Rangers would eventually spot him. As investigators pieced the journey together, the map looked less like a survival attempt, and more like the erratic wandering of a man guided by fragments of consciousness, fragments of hallucination, and a will that refused to surrender. In the final report, 3 hypotheses were offered, but none declared definitive instinct, pushing him forward even when reason was gone. Hallucination, leading him down paths that existed only in his mind. Pure chance, aligning his chaotic steps with the narrow corridor that saved his life. One ranger summarized the mystery best. If Harry had turned left instead of right at any point in those 64 kilometers, he'd be dead. Survival was not the logical outcome. The official reconstruction ended with a conclusion both scientific and unsettling. Harry Evans survived not because the desert allowed it, but because something drove him forward long after his mind and his body should have stopped. The Miracle Zone Rangers would later call it the Miracle Zone, a narrow passage high in the Black Mountains, where nothing alive should have been able to move under such conditions. It was here, amid the jagged rock and furnace-like air, that Harry Evans crossed the final threshold between certain death and impossible survival. The zone sits at the top of a steep, sun-blasted ascent, a place so brutal that even experienced rangers avoid it during the hotter months. The incline is sharp, the terrain brittle, and the winds funnel through the gap like the breath of a giant oven. Temperatures along the ridge can rise far above the already unbearable heat of the valley floor. It is a place where hikers collapse simply from trying to breathe. Harry should never have made it there. When investigators retraced his path, they found the faint imprints of his boots zigzagging upward, and Evan staggered, suggesting a man fighting not just gravity, but the slow shutdown of his own body. At that point in his journey, after nearly 60 kilometers under the Death Valley sun, medical experts estimate that Harry's blood pressure would have been collapsing, his organs failing one by one. He would have been lightheaded, nearly blind, and barely conscious. Yet he climbed, step after step. He dragged himself toward a call that no rational survival instinct would ever choose. Rangers familiar with the area explained that the pass is a dead end for most who attempt it, too steep to climb quickly, too exposed to provide safety, and offering no clear path on the other side. It is not a route, it is a test. And in Harry's condition, that test should have been fatal. But the evidence suggests something even stranger. Halfway up the col, just below the rock shelf, investigators found a smear of dried sweat and dust, signs that Harry had fallen, slid, then pushed himself upright again. There were handprints in the gravel, there was a boot mark sideways, as if he had lost his balance. Every trace showed he should have stopped there. A human body simply does not rise after collapsing under that heat, and yet, he did. The final ascent is the most baffling. The ridge narrows into a jagged corridor of stone, where loose rocks can give way beneath the slightest pressure. Rangers who climbed it during the reconstruction said that even with full hydration and gear, they felt their hearts pounding uncontrollably. One of them stopped midway and muttered, almost to himself, "There's no way a dying man climbed this." But Harry reached the top, and the moment he stood in that narrow saddle between two brutal cliffs, he entered the miracle zone. From this vantage point, something extraordinary becomes clear. The zone sits directly above a wind channel that occasionally produces a cool, downdraft, or rare, brief phenomenon that can drop the perceived temperature by several degrees for just a few minutes. Rangers believe Harry arrived at the exact moment this downdraft swept across the ridge. Unnatural air conditioning, in the most lethal place on Earth, for a man moments from collapse. That brief breath of cooler air may have been enough to revive him, just enough to continue. Enough to push him over the col, enough to carry him toward the patrol path where Rangers would soon appear. The miracle zone is not a place of safety, it is a place where survival is mathematically improbable. A place where heat should crush every remaining breath. A place where a man in Harry's state should fall, close his eyes, and never rise again. Yet this is where he was found, where he defied biology, physics, and the desert itself. In the official report, investigators marked the site with a simple note. Subject should have expired at this location, but he didn't. Instead, Harry Evans walked out of the miracle zone and into the path of a ranger patrol, proving once again that his entire journey was not driven by chance alone, but by a force, physical, psychological, or something else entirely, that refused to let him die. Science versus mystery. They brought Harry back to base wrapped in thermal blankets, shaking, mumbling, eyes wide open yet seeing nothing. The medics expected severe hypothermia, dehydration, organ collapse, the usual fate of anyone trapped in that part of the valley. But when they placed him under the fluorescent lamps and ran the first tests, the room fell into a silence so heavy it felt physical. His body temperature was low, but not low enough to explain his survival. His heart rhythm was irregular, but showed no sign of prolonged stress. And his blood oxygen levels impossibly were almost normal. One physician, a man with 30 years of experience in Arctic survival cases, whispered the words no one dared say out loud. "This doesn't match anything I've seen." They pressed further, blood panels, neuroscans, a full toxicology sweep. The results came back clean, almost suspiciously so. No sign of altitude sickness, no frostbite, no internal damage, not even the metabolic chaos expected after days without proper sleep or food. His body behaved like it had been protected, not by clothing, not by shelter, but by something that simply shouldn't exist. Experts in wilderness survival were brought in. A ranger from the Alaskan Rescue Corps, a woman known for retrieving climbers from impossible crevasses, listened to Harry's account, the valley, the long corridors of ice, the soundless air, the pull toward the unknown, and she shook her head before he even finished. "No," she said firmly, "no one crosses that ridge alive, and certainly not in his condition." Yet he did. Meteorologists reviewed atmospheric data. Geologists analyzed soil samples from Harry's boots. Military analysts rechecked satellite readings, searching for storms, temperature anomalies, anything that might explain the phenomenon. Every department came back with the same cold verdict. Nothing in nature matched what he described. Nothing in science justified his survival. Even the psychological team failed to offer an explanation. They argued over hallucinations, dissociation, trauma-induced memory distortion, but none of it aligned with the physical evidence. Harry wasn't disoriented, he wasn't confused. His recollection was detailed, consistent, disturbingly coherent. When asked what he remembered most clearly, he paused for a long moment before answering. "It felt," he said, "like something wanted me alive." That sentence echoed through every meeting room for days. Scientists debated, military officials whispered, some accused Harry of fabricating the story. Others believed he had stumbled into an extreme microclimate, a rare atmospheric tunnel, perhaps, but the further they looked, the more the data pushed them toward the one conclusion they were not prepared to accept. Whatever happened to Harry was real, but it did not belong to anything we currently understand, and so the case was quietly sealed, stored under a classification level that ensured no one outside a select circle would ever read the report. But those who had seen the files, doctors, rangers, officers hardened by years of rational service, all admitted the same thing in private. Harry shouldn't have survived, yet he did. And the valley still had more to say. Legacy. the man who shouldn't be alive in the years that followed. Harry's file circulated quietly among rescue teams, survival instructors, and ranger units across North America. Not officially, of course. Officially, it didn't exist. But stories have a way of slipping through cracks, especially stories that challenge everything you think you know about the wilderness. For trekkers, Harry's survival became a whispered reminder that nature still holds pockets of the unknown areas, where maps lose meaning, where logic collapses, where instinct isn't a guideline but the only lifeline you have left. His case reshaped entire training modules. Instructors began teaching a new principle, one that wasn't in any manual before: trust the environment, but never assume you understand it. Rangers, especially those stationed near remote valleys and unexplored ridges, still talk about him. New recruits hear the tale during their first winter briefing, not as folklore, but as a cautionary lesson, not about danger, about humility, about the fact that survival isn't always a contest of strength or skill, but sometimes something stranger, something that doesn't fit any known category. Some rangers believe Harry encountered an extreme microclimate, others think he crossed paths with an ancient atmospheric phenomenon, a rare convergence of heat, wind, and pressure that formed a pocket of protection around him. But privately, away from the paperwork and the rational explanations, a few will tell you something different. They say the valley chose him. Ask them why, and they won't answer. They'll just look out toward the tree line, toward the places where compasses spin and radios fail, and where even the most seasoned rescuers feel watched by something older than the park itself. They'll tell you Harry walked through a zone where hikers vanish, not return. Yet he came back, calm, coherent, changed. His legacy grew not because he survived, but because of how he survived in conditions that should have erased him. His story became proof that there are still regions on Earth untouched by full understanding, places that are not supernatural, yet not entirely natural either, the kind that exists in the thin, trembling line between science and mystery. And today, his case remains one of the most discussed, unsolved survival events in Ranger history. A reminder that the world still has corners where the rules don't apply, where logic bends, and where, for reasons we may never know, the impossible becomes real for a single human being. Before he retired, one veteran ranger summed it up in a sentence that still circulates in briefing rooms. Harry didn't survive because he was strong. He survived because something, whatever it was, wasn't ready to let him go. And that is the legacy of the man who shouldn't be alive. A legacy carried in ranger stories, in trainee manuals, and in the cautious footsteps of trekkers who know that sometimes, the wilderness isn't just a place you cross, but a presence that watches you pass. Now we leave the question to you. Tell us in the comments, was it survival, or something else guiding him through Death Valley? And if you want more authentic, impossible stories, the kind that force you to question what the world is actually capable of, make sure you subscribe. There are more mysteries waiting.